So I'm very pleased to be able to introduce you to Jane Sherry from Waltham Forest Council, who's joining us today to speak about the ins and outs of the Enjoy Waltham Forest project. Jane is the Behaviour Change Project Manager at the Council, where she's worked since 2014. Jane's work on the Enjoy Waltham Forest programme focuses on encouraging and enabling everyone to walk and cycle where possible, whilst enjoying the unique culture and green spaces of the borough. And the workshop will cover the core work undertaken through this project, including extensive infrastructure and behaviour change schemes, including cycle lane provision, cycle training, infrastructure improvements for pedestrians, and better accessibility to public transport. I'll pass over to you now, Jane, but before I do, I'd just like to encourage everyone watching to please use the chat function throughout the workshop to share your thoughts, your questions. We'd really love to see active discussions happening, and we have plenty of time at the end allocated to the Q&A, so please get your questions in. So over to you now, Jane.
Great, thanks, Winter. So, as Winter said, I'm the Behaviour Change Project Manager in the Highways team at Waltham Forest Council. I've been working on the Mini Holland, now Enjoy Waltham Forest programme since 2014, when we were awarded £30 million from Transport for London and the Greater London Authority to introduce cycling improvements in the borough. The programme has come on a long way since then, from the cycling-focused name of Mini Holland to the much more holistic approach of the Enjoy Waltham Forest programme. The primary aims of the programme were to introduce a network of joined-up cycle routes, create safer streets for walking and cycling, encourage more people to travel by foot or by cycle, and to achieve a better balance between movement and place. We look to achieve these through 4 key work streams: village schemes, which are now better known as low-traffic neighbourhoods, town centre schemes, a cycle route network, and behaviour change initiatives, and our achievements to date are detailed on the slide. This is our flagship cycle route, Lea Bridge Road, which was completed in October 2019 and has seen a £15 million transformation from a very car-dominated environment with very little space allocated for walking and essentially none for cycling, to the introduction of 8 kilometres of continuous segregated cycle tracks and 2 new bridges to increase capacity for people travelling actively. The scheme has acted as a catalyst for regeneration, with new housing, businesses and the doubling in frequency of trains from Lea Bridge Station. Our village and low-traffic neighbourhood schemes have also transformed residential areas. This particular location is within our Coppermill livable neighbourhood area, a project which became an extension of our Enjoy programme in 2017. Whilst this road hasn't been a through route for many years, it had become essentially a car park that attracted antisocial behaviour. After introducing these rain gardens back in 2018, which were planted by the residents themselves, we've seen an amazing change in the use of this area, with the local community using it to form a gardening club and a kids' scooting area, and people no longer feeling afraid to walk or cycle through it. The rain gardens have also had a great environmental benefit by reducing localised flooding in the area. To nurture the borough's growing walking and cycling culture, a range of behaviour change initiatives have been introduced alongside a comprehensive marketing and communication strategy to promote them. We've introduced secure cycle parking in residential areas and at train stations, trained over 20,000 people in cycle skills and fixed over 5,000 bikes free of charge. To enable residents to take part even if they don't own their own cycle, we set up a scheme which provides free cycle loans, and since May 2018, over 600 residents have utilised this service. In February 2019, we also launched our Community Walking and Cycling Fund, and since then we've supported over 30 projects run by community organisations that have delivered active travel-based projects in their local communities. So, what was key in securing the widespread buy-in necessary to be successful? In September 2014, we ran a live trial of the Walthamstow Village Low Traffic Neighbourhood Scheme for 2 weeks. Low-cost interventions such as planters, benches and astroturf were introduced as makeshift modal filters and parklets, and residents had the opportunity to trial living with the changes prior to responding to a consultation. Council officers were on site daily to direct vehicles, answer questions on the trial, and take feedback from residents, businesses and visitors. The measures were supported overall, and we introduced them permanently in September 2015. However, at the launch of the scheme, we had inadvertently created a great space for protest by closing the road to most vehicles. After the scheme had been in place for a year, We carried out a survey with residents and businesses to find out their thoughts, and the results showed that only 1.7% of residents would scrap it and revert back to the former layout. Of course, we still can't please everyone though, and there's always more community engagement to do. The Walthamstow Village trial enabled us to redefine our approach and design a multi-stage engagement process. This process involves concurrent project stages, which see schemes designed for movement and placemaking, with community involvement interconnected at the heart of these. We still continue to follow this co-design approach to this day. As part of this approach, we have utilised technology to effectively engage with the community using Commonplace. One recent example of this is for our South Leytonstone low traffic neighbourhood scheme in partnership with the London Borough of Newham, which was introduced in autumn 2020. We used the Commonplace online engagement platform to develop an ongoing dialogue with local people from day one. An overview of the scheme is available to view alongside more detailed information on each of the interventions that are being introduced as part of the scheme. This allows people to comment on specific locations and modal filters to let us know how well they're working on the ground and respond quickly to any issues or concerns that arise. News updates are posted on the Commonplace site regularly and are sent out to people who have signed up, enabling us to address any concerns throughout the scheme and show local people we are listening and responding accordingly. We found that effectively using and presenting data has also really helped residents to understand what we've done and why when engaging with them. Prior to the Lee Bridge Road scheme being introduced, we undertook a perception survey with businesses and their customers. As you can see, businesses thought that 63% of their customers travelled to them by car, and they therefore wanted more car parking to further encourage business. In reality, however, only 20% of customers travel by car, with over 60% walking, and their customers therefore wanted better crossings, less traffic, and protected cycle lanes. Presenting this data in this infographic format made it easy for the community to see the differences in responses and reinforced our reasoning for introducing the scheme. So what are the funding requirements for taking this kind of action, and how can they best be met? Whilst we received £30 million from Transport for London, and we're in a fortunate position to be able to complement this with a range of other funding streams, the outcomes of what we delivered can be achieved with a wide range of budgets. Take our modal filters, for example. The design on the left, which is on Northcote Road in Walthamstow, includes a planting bed, a bike hanger, cycle stands, a resin-bound surface, wooden bollards, and block-paved blended crossings. The design on the right, on Grosvenor Park Road in Walthamstow, features several tree pits, a planter, and some standard bollards. Whilst this one is less aesthetic and doesn't include as many facilities, they are both achieving the same outcomes of preventing through traffic, although one costs a quarter of the other. Another similar scenario can be seen on our cycle tracks. Lee Bridge Road on the left features 8 kilometres of fully segregated cycle tracks, whereas Rockcott Road on the right still provides protection for people on cycles, but uses armadillos and wands. These are a much lower cost solution and can also be easily moved if required, therefore making them great for trialling ideas. We maximised our available funding by utilising a range of streams, including Section 106 and 278 developers' contributions, DFT funding, and introducing schemes in partnership with organisations such as Network Rail. How can local economic and co-benefit be maximised through replicating this action? So we've seen some fantastic health benefits so far. Data from King's College London indicates that on popular cycling routes, exposure of NO2 is predicted to reduce by up to 25%, and for PM2.5 by up to 13%. Children born now are living 6 weeks longer, and the number of households exposed to toxic fumes above the EU legal threshold has reduced from 58,000 to less than 6,500. In 2020, we also saw a record number of people using our cycle routes, with an average 56% more journeys recorded by our cycle counters compared to 2019. And in December, we saw the highest increase, with 95% more journeys cycled compared to December 2019. We've also seen economic benefits too. We've improved two local high streets in the borough, Orford Road in Walthamstow and Francis Road in Leyton. These were in need for change, with high numbers of vehicle movements per day, congestion and speeding, footways blighted by parked cars, and a high number of vacant units. We introduced the time pedestrianisation of the streets, which allows businesses to receive deliveries in the morning and evening, but leaves the road free during the day for walking, cycling, and generally enjoying the improved environment. The local businesses and residents have taken ownership of the roads and have really embraced their new public space, with the businesses hosting jumble trails, carol singing, and even a special day for dogs. New businesses have opened too, which is a great outcome. What's the best advice you could give to those trying to replicate what you did? So my first piece of advice would be to synergise infrastructure with behaviour change initiatives. Introducing walking and cycling infrastructure is very much needed. However, if people aren't aware of it and not confident using it, or they don't have the equipment to use it, then they won't. Our behaviour change programme is wide-reaching, and we try to include a range of initiatives for cycling, walking and kick scooting. However, there's always more that we can do to engage more people. My second piece of advice is to develop a robust marketing and communications plan that uses inclusive and relatable imagery. Very few people can relate to seeing a lycra person on a racing bike. However, by including a range of cycles that are being used for a range of purposes, people are more likely to think, oh, well, that could be me, and try it out. My final piece of advice is to work with community organisations and neighbourhood groups to enable community ownership of schemes and initiatives. Through our Community Walking and Cycling Fund, we've supported local community leaders to run their own active travel projects, which included a BMX club for children, a Biking with Babies project, and Walk and Talk for Your Life, which is a research project that looked at the impacts of group walking exercise and interactive health discussion sessions on older adults' feelings of loneliness. We also encourage community ownership through our widespread planting and parklet schemes, whereby local residents co-design green spaces, plant them, and subsequently maintain them with our support. Finally, do you have any resources which could be shared with others as a template to help them on their way? So yes, we do. We currently have 6 key documents on the Enjoy Waltham Forest website which you may find useful. These include our Vision 2020 strategy, our design guide, and 4 editions of our walking and cycling accounts, which detail what we've done, when, how, and the outcomes of these. We also host walking and cycling study tours, which can be arranged by emailing us using the contact details on the screen. So thank you very much for joining me today, and please feel free to ask any questions that you may have.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Jane. That was amazing. And yeah, very well timed, considering all of the things that you had to fit in, because there's been a lot of work that has happened in the borough. So yeah, I think at the moment we haven't had any questions through. Oh, here we do. From Karen. Now, I just want to say it's really nice if people are interested in coming on screen to sort of have a bit of a dialogue. I think it makes it a little bit more engaging. So Karen, if you wanted to, you can request to come on screen, but that's very much up to you. Otherwise, I'm very happy to read your question now. I'll get the ball rolling and I'll ask the question. Are the cheaper options for LTNs as popular with local residents? Is that something you have data on or an awareness of?
So I don't think that we have any specific data on that, but I know just from sort of our experience so far that lots of people they see the benefits of the LTNs and they understand, particularly since COVID, that we've not had as much budget to be able to introduce such more expensive schemes. However. It does enable us with the cheaper schemes to be able to trial different solutions. If they work, we can then go back and retrofit a more sort of expensive, aesthetically pleasing, perhaps with more facilities. And that's what we can do in the future. And then we know then that we're not wasting any money, that they're going to work in that location. Absolutely.
Brilliant. One thing I think you covered the program really, really well, which is potentially why everyone is not jumping to ask questions in the chat. But one thing I wanted to find out was what are the plans for Waltham Forest going forward? I guess, maybe short, medium and long term. Is there more in the works? I'm lucky enough to live in the borough and I really enjoy the incredible amenities that we have at the moment. But yeah, I would love to hear what else we've got in the works.
Yeah, definitely. So at the moment, we're currently going back, and where we've put in some of the semi-segregated schemes, we've started to put in segregated cycle tracks now. Just where we've been able to join up, we've been able to have more funding and sort of complete those schemes. But we've been able to see how well they work with the semi-segregated options, which has been great. We're also looking at the LTNs that we put in last year during COVID, and then looking to make those permanent as well, and introducing more permanent features. And then we're also kind of aligning with the regeneration that's happening in the borough as well. So, for example, the Waltham Forest Town Hall redevelopment, and we're putting in new cycle lanes outside the town hall and just improving interconnectivity within that area.
Fantastic. Very exciting. And one of the other things that I wanted to ask was around, I guess, the pandemic and kind of moving to this next phase, and also reflecting on maybe some of that learning that you were able to sort of have during the pandemic, like, you know, this incredible increase in people using active travel options. What do you have any advice or thoughts even on kind of moving into this next phase? And taking that kind of learning with you that might be applicable to other areas.
Yeah, I think one thing that we are really trying to do is sort of build upon the increased levels of walking and cycling from 2020, and just encourage people to continue that, even though we are returning to the new normal. So if people were cycling for leisure, to still continue to do that, and maybe trial cycling for other purposes as well. So that's something that we're focusing on now.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah, I guess, I mean, I found it really interesting to hear about this sort of journey that you've gone on with kind of like resident engagement around the changes in the borough. And you have done a really good job of explaining how you kind of manage that buy-in. I guess one thing maybe if you do have information on is whether you know, you use a specific kind of approach to engaging with a wide kind of range of people. You know, you mentioned those surveys. Kind of how did you make sure that that co-design process was kind of inclusive? And yeah.
Our engagement strategy is very wide-reaching, and it has lots of different strands to it depending on the groups or demographics that we're engaging with. So for some, we might just do the sort of online digital engagement, whereas for others, we know that perhaps usage of internet is a bit lower, so we will continue with paper-based solutions to make sure that the process is as inclusive as possible. And we also have regular engagement with specific groups, such as visually impaired groups, mobility impaired groups, just to make sure that we're including those within the design process from the start.
Brilliant. I've just noticed that I've been neglecting the chat, and we've got lots of brilliant questions in there. So I'm just going to jump in there now and just pick up on them. So we've got Mike singing praise for the presentation, which is great. And Karen is asking, have you encouraged electric bikes as part of the project?
Yes, we definitely realise that electric bikes mean that a lot more people are able to take up cycling than perhaps normally would. They allow people to travel further and with greater ease. So we have electric bikes available to hire as part of our community loan scheme. So people control them for free for like sort of 3 to 4 weeks at a time. Yeah, it's been really great uptake. It allows people to see what it's like, whether it can fit into their lives without the commitment of buying one and then seeing. So that's one thing that we've been doing, and we're currently looking into how we can provide provision for charging electric bikes as well as part of our electric vehicle charging program.
Brilliant. That's great to hear. Yeah, you're combining it with the electric vehicle program. Really interesting. I'm going to move on to Janet's question now. And again, if anyone wants to request to come on screen, please do. I think that'd be lovely, rather than you having to just listen to my voice. So Janet's asking, how far is increased cycling and walking just for leisure, and how far is it for travel to work or shopping and so
on? The data that we collect on cycling journeys, we don't have it broken down into purpose at the moment. However, the DFT does release data regularly on cycling and walking for different purposes all across the UK. I know that our leisure cycling and walking is quite high. We also are able to analyze our data based on time, so we can kind of look at the key sort of commuting hours and kind of work out whether that's most likely for commuting or whether it's for leisure as well. But we have no specific data at the moment.
Okay, great. And now I'm going to jump to Joe, which is, how much support did you get from your local councillors in making the infrastructure changes, especially when they met with opposition? And how did you engage with the councillors? Which is a great question.
Yeah. So we've been really lucky that Councillor Clyde Loates, who is the environment portfolio holder in Waltham Forest, he's also the deputy leader of the council, and he's really been championing the scheme ever since the bid was submitted. So you've probably seen him on Twitter. He's Labour Stone, and he's very he engages a lot on there with a wide variety of people, and even when met with opposition, we can kind of include those comments and the sort of feedback that we get from those people and try and improve schemes for everybody. However, he feels that we do need to make this action in order to respond to the climate emergency, and therefore it's important for this to happen. So without his support and his determination, we probably wouldn't be in the position that we are today. So we've been really lucky to have him.
Fantastic. And Karen, a question on, has any data been collected from businesses on the economic impact of the increased cycling walking, which I think you touched on a little bit in your presentation, that was actually turned out in some areas at least to be positive?
Yeah, definitely. So on the areas that we've pedestrianised, so Orford Road and Francis Road, whilst we don't have any specific data, just anecdotally, when we introduced those schemes on both locations, we probably had about a quarter of units were unoccupied. But since the schemes have gone in, all the units are now occupied with new businesses. We've had new bookshops opening, which is practically unheard of at the moment. We've had record shops opening on these streets. So I think that a combination of the schemes that have been introduced, a change in demographic of the area has really supported the businesses, particularly the independent businesses in the area.
Yeah, you're really painting this picture of a real lovely independent high street there with the record stores and the bookshops. That's wonderful. Okay, I'll move on to Mike, who is asking, do you get complaints from people living using non-LTN through routes that their traffic or congestion has increased?
So yes, we do. Particularly on the sort of the main roads in the borough, which they're typically designed for higher volumes of traffic. So they're now being used more for their purpose than the residential routes, which aren't designed for that. But that's something that we're now working on to make sure that we're encouraging people to choose more sustainable options than their private vehicles to reduce number of vehicles. But overall, we haven't seen a great increase of vehicles on these roads. It's kind of just changing people's perception.
Great. And I've got some more questions in the Q&A as well, which I want to cover. I understand that you use e-cargo bikes for council deliveries. Can you say something about how this is going and whether you think this will inspire businesses to do the same?
Yes, so we have Zed, our zero emission delivery service, which we set up ourselves back in 2017 using the Mayor's Air Quality Fund grant. So it's run in partnership with Redefining, who do zero emission deliveries using cargo bikes across the country. So we do deliveries for council services. For example, waste and recycling bags are delivered using cargo bike. Our consultation leaflets are delivered using cargo bike. Library books are distributed between libraries using the cargo bikes as well. But we also have around 70 local businesses using them as well, which is really great. Yeah, so that's sort of in the East London area and into central London as well.
Okay, so I guess, yeah, the numbers speak for themselves in terms of that kind of replication of other businesses doing the same thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. So I've got plenty more questions to cover, so I'll carry on. So from Hilary, do you have any issues with shared use areas, for example, at bus stops?
So yes, we have. So we have bus stop bypasses at some of our bus stops, where the cycle track goes in between the bus stop and the place where people sort of alight and disembark the buses. So we do get some feedback that people that are getting on and off the buses feel that the cyclists aren't stopping for them when they're getting on and off the bus. So that's just something that we're continuing to work on at the moment, improving signage around those areas just for cyclists to give way, for people to look left and right for cyclists when they're getting on and off the bus as well, and just
Yeah,
trying to encourage people to look out for each other in the area.
yeah, absolutely. We've got a question here from Julia, which I think someone else wanted to hear more about, which was the temporary trials of parklets and how you worked with your highways team on what TROs you used. So just want to know a bit more information on that, and have commented that East Sussex is very wary of letting us even trial a parklet.
So we've got 2 parklets in the borough at the moment, which we introduced. So one is on Winchelsea Road in the South Leytonstone Forest Gate area, and one is on Coppermill Lane in Walthamstow. So these have been introduced. The Winchelsea Road one is outside an area with quite a parade of bars and restaurants, and the one on Coppermill Lane is outside a community centre. So their purposes of quite different things. They were introduced about 18 months ago now, probably about 2 years ago actually, and they've been really well received, being used for different things. So our next steps are now for residents to introduce their own parklets on their streets for a variety of purposes. We've had some residents that want to introduce them for cargo bike parking, some for increased outdoor space, if there's flats in the area where people don't have much of their own outdoor space. So that's kind of like our next step with parklets at the moment.
Fantastic. And so obviously you've worked quite closely with the highway teams to enable that. I mean, yeah, if you could say any more about that, I think that was kind of the question that I wanted to understand, is like how was that made possible, I guess.
Yeah, so luckily we're based within the highways team. We're not sort of like separate in transport planning. So it does make it probably a little bit easier for us. I'm not too sure what specific TRO was used for these, but I can find out and provide more information if that would be useful.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Fantastic. And then I'll jump back to the chat area to find other questions. Oh, okay, Karen. Apologies that you haven't been able to be let in. I will see if I can get someone to help me with that. Just bear with me, and I'll ask this next question so we can get an answer in the meantime. So Karen would like to know, are you planning to do more data collection in addition to the mostly anecdotal, as you've mentioned, as that can help other areas argue for similar approaches? That's a really great question, Karen.
Yes, definitely. Unfortunately, as everyone knows, sort of collecting any sort of data over the last 18 months probably wouldn't be that accurate compared to if we're looking to compare it to previous data. So that is something that we're definitely looking forwards to the end of this year and next year to collect a lot more data. We're also looking forward to the census data from earlier this year being released as well, as that will provide a lot more data as well.
Fantastic. And then Karen is asking, my ward is currently planning a bypass around a small rural village and want to integrate a cycle lane and create a network with other villages with cycle lanes. And your question is this justifiable with declaring a climate emergency? So it's a tricky question. What stance you kind of have on that?
Yeah, so I guess that this is a little bit different to what we've been doing in Waltham Forest. From personal experience, I grew up in quite a rural village. I guess that if you've got quite a small rural village with quite a close-knit community, you would want to reduce the amount of traffic going through that village to make it safer and a more pleasant place to live. So I guess the bypass on one hand would kind of solve that, particularly with integrating a cycle lane. Often the roads within rural areas are much faster. They don't have the walking and cycling infrastructure that is required to get more people walking and cycling. So just with the details there, it does sound like a good idea, but obviously you don't want the bypass to then be creating more traffic and encouraging more people to buy cars.
Great. Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? But I think that's a useful answer. Just trying to see if we have anything else that I've missed. So we've had someone asking if you could put your contact details in the chat as well. Oh, hello, Alan.
Hi.
I did just ask for some support with bringing people on screen. So if anyone still wants to come on screen and have a bit of a chat, you're absolutely welcome to. That would be nice to have people, using this chance to chat to Jane and pick her brain about the Waltham Forest programme. So yeah, if you can request again, I think I've got Alan's support now.
Yeah, there's 3 people who I think might have wanted to come on screen. Janet, Janet Upward, Julie Hilton, and Karen Mitchell.
Yeah, I see them now in that bottom pane. Okay, so
and you just click
am I
on
pressing the green.
You just click on their initials, and they should come on screen. There you go.
Oh, there we go.
Perfect.
Apologies, everyone. That was
I'll leave you to it.
Thanks, Alan. That's great. Fantastic.
Oh, there's Karen.
I don't have any more questions now, though.
Oh, you don't have any more. If anyone has any more, please chime in.
I think I asked you
I was
parklets, but it's just I think if you're embedded in highways, then that must make a huge difference. We're trying to work from the Heritage Action Zone into the county, and they seem to be we're at a very different stage of the culture change, I think, from where you are in Waltham Forest, and just be interesting to hear your thoughts on what you think was the most useful thing in beginning that shift of getting a culture change, if you can cast your mind back to the beginning of this process.
Yeah, I mean, it was very difficult at the start of the process. I think since then we've had a lot more people being sort of accepting of the changes. We've also had quite a change in demographic of the area, with a lot of people moving out from Hackney to Waltham Forest, where they were probably more used to walking and cycling infrastructure. So that's also helped as well. But I think just sort of we've been quite persistent. We haven't just given up if someone said, no, I don't want that. We've kind of been trying to adapt our approach as well. So you can see we did the live trial. We've then introduced our 7-step engagement process as well, and kind of trying to get people engaged in the process right from the start, particularly with the co-design. We know that some people might not be happy if we put a modal filter on their street. However, if they've got involved in designing like a kids sort of play area and community planting area, then they're much more likely to be accepting of it. So yeah, as you say, getting people involved from the start.
That's great. Is there any place that if someone was interested, they could access more information on the engagement approach? Because I think that's a really interesting piece of work that could be really helpful.
Yes, so I'll post a link to our resources on our Enjoy Waltham Forest website. So we've got some information in our vision and also in our walking and cycling accounts as well.
Fantastic. Janet, did you also have a question you wanted to ask?
Well, this is just a tiny detail, but in that one of those first schemes that you introduced, where they introduced the rain garden, and I just wondered what had happened to all the parked cars. They had to go somewhere else because presumably they weren't all leaping on their bikes, or were they?
So I think that we removed about 4 parking spaces, and then 2 were introduced just by sort of reallocating the road space in the area. So I think overall about 2 were removed. So it wasn't a sort of substantial change.
Right.
But I think there has been a reduction in car ownership in this area since we have introduced the scheme.
Right. That's interesting.
Great. We still have a bit more time. We've got just over 5 minutes. So one thing, I'll just check if we have any other questions, but another, I think quite interesting area of work is the grant program that you run as well. And I think it would be nice to hear about maybe 1 or 2 of the funded projects, if you can, that came up out of that.
Yes, definitely. So I think that one of my sort of favourite projects that we've been supporting as part of this is the Walk and Talk for Your Life project. So this originally started as a research project from a master's student that was living in the area. And his thesis was based upon how introducing group walking exercise sessions along with health-based discussions would improve residents' feelings of loneliness. And he started off by doing, I think it was like 2 sessions a week with about 10 people, like sort of based from a local park. And then he was kind of tracking their kind of feelings every day, how they were enjoying the walks. And then we found that there was about a 25% reduction in feelings of loneliness and depression from these people taking part in the walks, which was a really great outcome. He's been continuing that as well, and particularly during COVID, people have been meeting up for walks that had been part of the programme, but now just enjoy walking together and exploring the borough, which has been great. So that's been one really great one. Yeah. And then another one is Carry Me Bikes. They've been running a project called Biking with Babies. So that's been a lending library where people can borrow different seats, trailers, attachments for their bikes to be able to take their children cycling with them. We found that a lot of people were quite regular cyclists, but then after having children didn't quite know how to adapt to cycling with them. So Carry Me Bikes, they've been providing in-person and online support and this lending library so that people can trial different things, see what works for them on their bikes, and then there's no commitment to buy, but then quite a lot of people then go on to buy the equipment afterwards.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's brilliant. I think in the context of some where Waltham Forest is, which is in London, is that those challenges of traveling with children, you know, it really is like taking away another barrier as well in that sense, which is fantastic. I can see another question in the chat has popped up, which is great. So it's Alex Smith who's commented, I work in Nottinghamshire and we struggle with promoting walking and cycling commuting in rural areas. I think this would help encourage that and provide safer infrastructure, giving people the options. Okay, so it's more of a comment, sorry, instead of relying on cars, which, yeah, well, great. That's great to hear that you think there's something to take away from the Waltham Forest project that could be applied there. And there's another one here I've missed, which is, oh, sorry, no, that was Janet. You came on and you asked that. Brilliant. So we've got, Kate's just jumped in to let us know that following the Q&A, we have 15 minutes for networking. So you can catch up with some of the organisations in the Expo booth tab. So you can also, so that's 2 options there. But yeah, Jane, if you wanted to add anything else, you're very welcome to. Otherwise, we can kind of wrap up and everyone can go off, grab a cup of tea and get ready for the next session.
No, this has been great. Thank you very much for inviting me. If anybody does have any more questions, please feel free to email me, or if you want interested in arranging a tour, we can sort that out as well.
Brilliant. Thanks so much again. And thank you to everyone who joined and all the questions. It's been a great discussion.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Take care. Thanks, everyone. Bye.